No one could have imagined that the relationship between Prince William and his stepmother Camilla would be suffocatingly tense. Behind the red velvet curtain at Buckingham Palace lies a Cold War, where dagger-like glances and heavy silence are more frightening than any public criticism. Camilla, once dubbed by the public as the third party who destroyed Diana's happiness, has never truly regarded William as her husband's son. And William, growing up in the pain of losing his mother, has never forgiven the woman who intruded upon her marriage. Many times, Camilla was said to have openly shown irritation at William's presence during family meetings. Her cold expression, veiled but biting remarks, and condescending attitude in front of the media could not conceal the contempt. Deep down, Camilla always felt threatened by the strong and increasingly prominent presence of the heir to the throne. And she knew, the moment William ascends to the crown, the very foundations of the title she holds would begin to crumble. This is not just an ordinary stepmother-stepson relationship. This is an undeclared battle between two generations, between a woman who took the long road to the crown and a prince burdened with the legacy of his mother. A silent, Samayan, yet fiery confrontation. And behind the forced smiles and royal portraits, hostility smolders like a flame waiting for the perfect moment to ignite. In 2024, as King Charles's health visibly declined and rumors of a quiet transfer of power grew louder, Queen Camilla unexpectedly stepped forward as a central figure. No longer the shadow behind the king or the controversial wife once fiercely rejected by the public, Camilla now appeared at every major event with commanding posture and the piercing gaze of someone playing a high-stakes power game. And what shocked many even more was the fact that Prince William, the man expected to become the emblem of a new royal era, seemed to be gradually pushed aside. It didn't begin with an explosion. It arrived quietly, cunningly, through deliberate, subtle moves. A solemn ceremony at a children's charity one William had supported for years, and where he was expected to deliver a powerful speech, was abruptly postponed without clear explanation. The palace gave no formal statement. Meanwhile, media outlets were flooded with images of a beaming Camilla appearing at a private press conference about an ancient book preservation campaign, an event that had not even been included in the royal family's key agenda beforehand. No one said it out loud, but seasoned observers could clearly sense that something was wrong. Veteran journalists, long familiar with royal media tactics, noticed a new pattern emerging. Whenever William was scheduled to appear at an important event, plans would suddenly change, or mainstream coverage would be suspiciously absent. At the same time, Camilla was being broadcast live on national television, standing front and center, delivering speeches with the confidence of someone steering the future of the monarchy. An anonymous royal commentator exclaimed on a radio program, "This is no longer coincidence. This is a meticulously calculated plan. Camilla is trying to reshape the concept of the monarch, positioning herself as the ultimate symbol of power in the public eye." The question is, who is she doing this for and against whom? The answer became increasingly clear with each unfolding event. When William introduced a proposal to reach out to younger generations via social media, a widely praised and innovative initiative, less than a week later, Royal Communications announced a new project titled Guardians of Tradition, spearheaded by Camilla, aimed at preserving the United Kingdom's cherished values from uncontrolled change. The media quickly understood this was not just a cultural message. It was a veiled slap in the face to William, the representative of a new, youthful, and modern leadership vision. Subtle cracks even began forming within the royal household. Several of William's close staff were reassigned to minor departments or no longer permitted to attend high-level meetings. Whispered rumors spread that Camilla had requested a review of the prince's media team's role, citing concerns about a lack of image neutrality. A phrase that sounded harmless, but in the sensitive context of the monarchy, it was a clear signal of a silent purge. Inside the palace, William began to realize he was being systematically isolated. Important meetings regarding charitable activities, once the stronghold of both him and his wife, Princess Catherine, were gradually replaced by Camilla's initiatives and by new figures she had introduced. Trusted media advisors who had formerly worked for Diana, and whom William deeply relied on, were quietly removed from key positions. Across the newspapers, Camilla's image was completely reconstructed. No longer the quiet wife of an aging king, she was now portrayed as a resilient woman, the pillar of the monarchy, an iron hand in a velvet glove. Such glorification did not come by chance. It was the result of a methodical, coordinated, and intentional media campaign backed by a generous budget and experienced writers working behind the scenes. What's notable is that Princess Catherine, too, sensed this shifting tide. At a few rare public events, the press even recorded moments where Catherine appeared somewhat uneasy when standing next to Camilla. On one occasion, at a memorial ceremony for Princess Diana, Camilla was seated in the front row, while William and Catherine were placed behind a seating arrangement that caused a national stir. A setup loaded with implications to Diana. The big question was, why would Camilla dare to play such a bold game, and who was backing her? One theory raised by royal commentators is that Camilla understands one crucial truth: if she does not win public support now, then once King Charles passes away or abdicates, she will have no standing left in the royal household, especially once William, the son who carries Diana's blood, ascends the throne. The entire narrative of Camilla and the stolen crown would resurface. She had to act, and the time was now. Thus, Camilla's strategy was not only to target William's image, but also to gradually erode the public's faith in Diana's legacy as an irreplaceable symbol. The values Diana once stood for: compassion, closeness to the public, a humanistic spirit of reform, were being slowly rebranded by Camilla as emotional idealism, instability, and dangerous to the monarchy's succession. In her most recent speeches, Camilla repeatedly emphasized tradition, order, and rules. These keywords masked a deeper message: she is the only one strong enough to safeguard the crown. William, though he has yet to publicly respond, is said by insiders to be in a state of inner conflict. He cannot explode like his mother once did. He must remain calm to protect his family and the image of a future king. But this silence has caused public confusion. Is the prince truly being sidelined? The story does not end there. The silent confrontation between Camilla and William is expected to intensify in the coming year, especially as international media begin to openly speculate about King Charles's possible abdication. At that point, either Camilla will rise to the pinnacle of power as an untouchable figure, or she will face the fiercest wave of backlash the royal family has witnessed since Diana's death. And in a deeply divided Britain, William's silence might be the sharpest weapon, or it could be the calm before a coming storm. William, born to be king, now stands like a fading shadow behind the crown. What once belonged to him, the center stage, media attention, the public's affectionate gaze, has been quietly and skillfully seized. No one says it outright, but everyone sees it clearly. Camilla is occupying the role that rightfully belongs to the prince. And the most ruthless part is that everything is being done in the name of preserving the stability of the monarchy. At a grand national banquet held in Windsor in March 2024, attended by elites and international leaders, Camilla appeared in the central hall in a shimmering silver gown and the crown that once belonged to Diana. William was present but assigned to sit at the end of the honorary row, next to guests who barely caught the media's attention. When newspapers hit the stands the next morning, not one featured a photo of William on the front page. His name was only briefly mentioned in captions, like a side character in his own story. As for Camilla, she was hailed as the steadfast symbol of the new monarchy, the queen of a seamless transition of power. That feeling of being overshadowed wasn't just a media phenomenon. It appeared in the smallest details of royal events. At major ceremonies, Camilla was always positioned at the center of the camera frame, always the first to speak. William, who should have been the powerful voice of the next generation, was restricted to brief remarks, rarely broadcast live. On one occasion, when he visited an elderly care center in the countryside, the press published only a short news piece. Meanwhile, on the same day, Camilla visited a primary school and was instantly featured in full-length articles and prime media coverage. A royal media expert spoke out on a special program, stating, "The gradual disappearance of William from the media spotlight is not the result of coincidence. It is a carefully planned image restructuring strategy. As King Charles weakens, the palace needs a new face to maintain the monarchy's stability, and that person is not William." That statement rang out like a wake-up call, because if it is true that the palace is deliberately sidelining William from his role as successor, then this is no longer just a matter of image management. This is a full-blown power shift. Camilla makes no attempt to hide her ambition to control the media narrative. She maintains close relationships with many veteran editors at major newspapers. Behind the scenes, sources reveal that Camilla has been guiding which topics the press should highlight, and has even requested that segments about William be removed if they didn't align with her broader image strategy. Producers of royal television programs were also gently reminded to select flattering images of Camilla that project soft power, while being advised not to focus too much on William unless there was something notably new. More concerning still, William's closest aides also began to find themselves isolated. Some suddenly resigned without clear reasons. Sources claim they left because they could no longer withstand the pressure from the Queen's advisory teams. In a royal household known for its tightly controlled operations, such high-level staff changes in media roles are a clear signal of a shifting power structure. William, once a beloved prince, is now being pushed out of the spotlight by his own family. And his silence, though he maintains the calm demeanor of a gentleman, is increasingly being used as proof that his influence is fading. A future king cannot remain silent forever. One infamous commentator wrote, "Because when he stays silent, someone else will speak in his place." Perhaps the most bitter truth is that William is being forced to bear the weight of the past. As the son of Diana, he was always expected to carry on her legacy, a symbol of compassion, closeness to the people, and a yearning for change. But that very legacy now makes Camilla uneasy. For if William's image is allowed to grow stronger, her presence as queen will always be compared, always questioned. Camilla cannot allow that to happen. And the best way to secure her position is to gradually blur the name William in the public consciousness. The game is becoming tense. Every move Camilla makes is calculated, every appearance carefully designed to reinforce her authority and neutralize opposition. Meanwhile, William, who once held the future of the monarchy in his hands, now seems like someone pushed out of his own family's political chessboard. And the question now is not just whether William has the strength to reclaim his central role, it is whether he is willing to fight for the spotlight he was meant to inherit. Or will he allow Camilla, the woman once called the intruder in his mother's marriage, to redefine the image of a new monarch, one with no room for William and no echo of Diana? While William remains silent, striving to uphold the image of a steadfast heir weathering every storm, Catherine begins to follow the clues that others pretend not to see. With the sharp instincts honed from years behind the palace curtain, Catherine quickly detects abnormalities in the royal schedule. She is not one to suspect easily, but numbers do not lie. And this time, the numbers and calendar entries exposed a carefully staged plan to edge her husband out of the center of power. Catherine quietly asked her private secretary to extract the full schedule from the beginning of 2024 to September. She wanted to cross-reference every event William had attended, every press conference he was scheduled to join, every charitable initiative he had spent years building. And the result was truly shocking every time William was set to appear at a high-profile event. Camilla just happened to show up at another coinciding engagement, complete with TV cameras and the leading writers from top newspapers. The more Catherine analyzed, the clearer the pattern became. William visits a children's cancer hospital. Camilla hosts a traditional medicine symposium at Clarence House, same day, same time. William is invited to speak at the UN Youth Summit. The event is postponed for technical reasons, while Camilla suddenly appears at a diplomatic gala and steals the front pages. One by one, everything William worked to build was overshadowed by the carefully orchestrated spotlight that Camilla had prepared for herself. The line between coincidence and intent had all but disappeared. And then came the letters. One by one, Catherine read the words from the public carefully. We no longer see the prince. William's absence worries us. What's going on? Each line pierced the heart of a woman who had always supported her husband quietly from the background. This was no longer a personal matter. This was a threat to his image, to his reputation, and more than anything, to William's right to the throne. Not long after, Catherine secretly invited a psychologist who had previously advised top-level politicians to Windsor Castle. The conversation lasted nearly 2 hours. When Catherine laid out the data she had collected, along with William's recent psychological signs, the unusual apathy, the distant gaze during meetings, the forced smile whenever he stood beside his father and stepmother, the expert sat in silence before uttering a single sentence. These are the signs of someone whose influence is being systematically eroded. But the most frightening part is that he's starting to believe he truly no longer matters. That sentence struck Catherine like a knife to the heart. She knew that if this situation continued, William would not only lose his position, but lose himself. And if William fell, what would become of their 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis? She couldn't allow that to happen. Not while Camilla was steadily rewriting the royal power structure to fit her own vision. From that moment on, Catherine was silent no more. She began quietly rebuilding her own media network. Journalists once close to Diana, editors who still believed in William's integrity, were gradually brought back into contact. Not publicly, not loudly, but with steady purpose. She ramped up media campaigns focusing on William's social initiatives, instructed the advisory team to re-release a comprehensive record of his achievements over the past 5 years. She invited independent organizations to reassess the impact of the charities William had founded, and then discreetly fed that information to the media in the most careful and calculated manner. At the same time, Catherine started appearing more frequently at William's side. She knew that the image of the two of them as a united, unwavering couple would be the strongest shield against the forces seeking to divide and weaken them. At a public engagement in Manchester, when a reporter asked her about William's recent absence, Catherine smiled and replied with deliberate ambiguity, "Some may try to push someone out of the spotlight, but true dedication can never be hidden." That line was splashed across headlines the next morning, and the public began to ask the question in reverse: was William truly retreating? Or was someone working to dim his light inside the palace? Camilla easily sensed the shift. She knew Catherine had begun her counteroffensive, and what irritated her most was that Catherine was doing it far too cleverly. No finger-pointing, no scandal, but also no surrender. The battle between these two royal women, one who clawed her way from a scandalous past and one who preserved her dignity in the face of palace turbulence, had now officially begun. Not with swords or open blows, but with a keen understanding of public psychology, with strategic media moves, and above all, with a mother's instinct to protect her family at all costs. And amid that silent storm, Catherine chose her side, not the palace's side, nor the side of power. She stood with the truth. And to her, the truth was this: William was being deliberately dismantled. And if she didn't act, no one else would. From that very moment, Catherine began to realize this scheme didn't stop at William. It was creeping step by step into the next generation, and the first child to become a target was none other than Charlotte. It all played out under the calm exterior of a memorial ceremony at St. James's Palace, where the royal family was to host a special program honoring young people's contributions to the community. Prince George and Princess Charlotte were both scheduled to appear and read a letter they had written themselves about kindness and service. It was a moment many had anticipated as a refreshing symbol of the monarchy's hopeful future. Charlotte had practiced all week. She carefully learned how to pronounce each word, asked her mother how to express emotions appropriately, and joyfully put on the dress made especially for the occasion. But just hours before the ceremony, a sudden decision from higher up was delivered to William and Catherine's office. Charlotte would not be allowed to speak. The reason: she is too young to speak in public. Catherine was speechless. It wasn't the first time she had seen her child pushed aside, but it was the first time it happened so publicly and irrationally. George was only 2 years older than Charlotte. Why was he allowed to stand at the podium and speak? While Charlotte was not, the answer didn't need to be spoken aloud, for Catherine was all too familiar with the way power operated inside the palace. When someone wants you to disappear, they don't need a valid reason. They just need a polite enough excuse to avoid public outrage. Charlotte, though still young, could sense the hurt. She looked at her mother, eyes red and teary, and asked, "Did I do something wrong?" Catherine didn't know how to respond. She held her daughter tightly, but inside she was burning. When the event took place, George stood alone on stage, visibly awkward without his close companion by his side. Meanwhile, Camilla radiated at the center of the hall, smiling, speaking, once again basking in the spotlight. Not a single article the next day mentioned Charlotte. The little girl vanished from the story, as if she had never been invited, never practiced, never been excited. Veteran royal reporter Richard Astley wrote in the Daily Mirror, Charlotte's absence wasn't simply a technical matter. It was a moment that exposed the simmering tensions within the royal family, where a certain force appears determined to reshape the future by cutting out those they deem potential threats. Catherine understood this perfectly. She knew Camilla didn't want anyone, especially a beloved child like Charlotte, to overshadow the queen of tradition image she was carefully crafting. Because Charlotte's smart, confident, and bearing the aura of a young Diana was the perfect symbol of the generational continuity the public longed for. And if that image were lit too brightly, that light could easily cast a shadow over the very crown Camilla was wearing. Catherine no longer had any doubts that Camilla had begun targeting her children. The campaign to eliminate influence wasn't just aimed at William anymore. It now reached into the future of Diana's bloodline. It wasn't only William being pushed aside, but also his heirs, quietly being erased from the power narrative. From that day forward, Catherine silently changed her strategy. She was no longer merely defending her husband. She became the shield for all three of her children, George, Charlotte, and Louis. Every activity, no matter how small, was now closely monitored by her. She would not allow anyone, not even the most powerful, to manipulate her children's childhoods in service of the throne's political games. And then, just 1 week after the incident where Charlotte was sidelined, Catherine stunned the royal establishment by appearing at a school event in Norfolk not alone, but with Charlotte by her side. There was no press release, no official cameras. But within an hour of the photo surfacing on social media, major newspapers across the country ran headlines. Charlotte returns. Princess Catherine sends silent message to the palace. In the captured image, Catherine stood slightly behind, eyes full of pride as she watched her daughter chatting with other children. No speech, no podium, just presence. That was Catherine's form of resistance, subtle, graceful, but impossible to ignore. Camilla surely saw that photo, and she also understood that while she might control the media, she could not control the hearts of the people who continued to yearn for a new kind of royal model, compassionate, relatable, and sincere. Qualities that William and Catherine were instilling in their three children every single day. The game continues. But from this point forward, Catherine would not let any of her children be pushed to the sidelines again. Not Charlotte, not George, not Louis. And if anyone dares redraw the portrait of the throne without including those children, then she will be the one holding the brush with the instincts of a mother and the strength of a woman who refuses to surrender. And just as she was quietly preparing her next steps in this silent counteroffensive, it was George, the eldest son, the heir bearing the legacy of two legendary royal bloodlines, who did something no one could have predicted. The grand ceremony took place on a crisp autumn afternoon, as the entire royal family gathered in the great hall of St. James's Palace with George, in a perfectly fitted small suit, already bearing a clear resemblance to a future king, walked steadily beside his mother and younger sister. Though still smiling, the boy fully understood that the air was as tense as a stretched string. Charlotte, his ever-close companion, quietly held the neatly folded sheet of paper in her hand, head bowed, eyes red-rimmed, lips pressed tight. George was no naive child. He knew how hard Charlotte had practiced, how carefully their mother had prepared for both of them to appear together, and he also knew exactly who had made the last-minute decision to remove Charlotte. He could have chosen to remain silent, just as his father was trying to do amid a rainful of calculations. But George didn't want to do that. When everyone had taken their seats, the lights softly illuminated the stage, and the sound of a piano signaled the start of the ceremony. George suddenly stepped forward, walking directly toward Camilla, who sat at the center. No one prompted him, and there was no script for what he was about to do. The 11-year-old boy, with a voice both clear and determined, stood before the queen consort and said, "She practiced. Please let her speak." The entire hall froze. The whispers stopped. Backstage staff stood motionless. Aides lowered their heads, not daring to react. Even Camilla, who had mastered every situation with the poise gained from 2 decades in the eye of media storms, faltered for a brief moment. Her lips tightened. Her eyes blinked once. Then she silently looked away. But at that moment, no gaze in the room was fixed on Camilla anymore. Every eye was on the boy, his face calm, eyes glowing with courage. A royal staff member later described that moment the loudest silent slap a child had ever delivered to an adult. Catherine, standing behind, felt her heart clench. She had no idea what George was about to do. But when she saw her son stand up for his sister in front of hundreds of powerful eyes, she knew what she and William had tried to preserve all these years: the bond, the bravery, and the true qualities of a leader were burning strong in their children's hearts. No one could reject such a plea without diminishing themselves. And so, just minutes later, Charlotte, though not on the list of speakers, was invited to the stage beside her brother. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes had regained confidence. And when she spoke, the audience fell completely silent. It was a short speech, simple and childlike, but it carried a radiant truth. Kindness doesn't have to be big. Sometimes it's just standing up for someone you love. People barely remembered the polished messages delivered afterward. But the moment when George stepped forward for his sister and Charlotte stood firm to follow through became the focus that spread across newspapers and social medias in the days that followed. The phrase "George and Charlotte moment" flooded Twitter and Instagram. Royal commentators unanimously called it a rare emotional symbol in a royal world often cold and calculating. No one mentioned Camilla's name in those articles, but everyone understood that moment was a quiet counterattack the Queen could neither anticipate nor erase. From behind the scenes, Catherine stood still, watching her children. She didn't need to say anything more. She knew that in the most ruthless power game in Britain, where adults fought for every bit of public attention, it was the children with pure hearts, in a spirit of mutual protection, who were now the only light the monarchy had left. Camilla could control the media. She could sideline William. She could blur Catherine's image. But she could not extinguish the spirit those 3 children carried: the spirit of Diana, of compassion, of love that doesn't need protocol to exist. And when George spoke up, it wasn't just to reclaim fairness for Charlotte. It was to declare our family will be silent no longer. It was a warning, but also a declaration. The battle is not over. But from this day on, Camilla knows her opponent is no longer just Catherine. It is an entire next generation with hearts of strength and words that can silence even a throne. And at that moment, Catherine understood clearly it was time for her not just to stand behind her children, but to step forward, even if with quiet steps. They would carry great weight. There was no need to cause a stir, no need for direct confrontation. Catherine, guided by the instincts of a mother honed within the harsh political arena known as the British royal family, began to intervene. But the way she acted was unlike anyone else in the palace. No orders, no stomping feet demanding power. She chose a discreet approach, but one so effective it was chilling. Right after the rehearsal in which Charlotte's speech was cut, Catherine quietly requested a private meeting with the event's organizing committee, a group of people loyal to the old ceremonial system, always seeking to please the higher-ups. In front of them, she showed no anger. Instead, she spoke with a calm but firm voice, saying, "Fairness is not favoritism. It is a foundational principle of any institution that claims to represent public service." Catherine delivered a message that could not be ignored if Prince George was allowed to speak as a young royal representative. Then Princess Charlotte had the same right. She emphasized that her children were not stage props. If the goal was to promote unity across the new generation, then every member prince or princess must be given the same opportunity. One member of the organizing team recalled, "She didn't have to raise her voice, but when she spoke, the whole room fell silent." It wasn't Princess Catherine standing before us anymore. It was the image of a leader. Just a few hours later, Charlotte was reinstated on the list of speakers. There was no official announcement, no apology, but Catherine didn't need any of that. What she wanted was her daughter's presence on that stage and the right to speak, just like anyone else. When the official ceremony took place, the entire hall held its breath as Charlotte stepped up to the podium, holding the paper she had memorized over many days. George stood behind her, his eyes never leaving his sister. And Catherine, seated in the front row, her gaze bright amid a sea of solemn faces. She didn't have to say a word, but anyone watching could see it clearly. This was a mother's victory, a triumph not through force or authority, but through wisdom and quiet courage. Charlotte spoke, clear and confident. "We are never too small to make something good happen." A sentence that might as well have been written directly onto the towering walls of long-standing privilege. A message that forced those seated on thrones to reflect on themselves. Charlotte's poised appearance immediately became a media storm. But the attention wasn't only on the little girl. Every article, every feature mentioned Catherine as the one behind the shift. Royal analysts described her actions with the phrase "silent strength," the most dangerous weapon in politics, especially when wielded by a woman who understands both the rules and the blind spots of the palace. The Guardian wrote, "Catherine doesn't need to argue with Camilla, nor compete for the cameras. She only needs one small step to prove real influence doesn't come from power, but from justice and integrity." The Times called her the new role model for a generation of royal female leaders, both mother and protector, and one who understands the times. The irony was this: while Camilla tried to build the image of a queen of stability through carefully written speeches, Catherine won the hearts of the public through actions that needed no script. And nothing is stronger than truth proven through action. That night, as the family returned to Windsor Castle, Charlotte threw her arms around her mother and whispered, "I did it. Because of you." Catherine smiled, brushing her daughter's hair, her eyes no longer carrying the sadness they once held during those early days in the grand but cold palace. Because she knew the battle was far from over. The enemy still remained. But from now on, she would not fight alone. Beside her were her brave children, a steadfast husband, and a growing trust from the public. Camilla could scheme as much as she wanted, manipulate however many layers of power she could reach, but she could not shake what Catherine was quietly nurturing: a next generation, not just to inherit the throne, but to inherit integrity. And when the ceremony ended, under the soft golden lights of the palace, there was a small but stirring detail that Charlotte held George's hand. George held their mother's, and they walked out of the hall to the sound of thunderous applause while Camilla stood alone behind them, silently turning away. And no one noticed the crown on her head anymore. And what Camilla never anticipated was that Catherine did not need to retaliate with words because the public would do that for her. Just hours after the ceremony ended, social media exploded. A short video capturing the moment Prince George bravely stepped forward, pleading with Camilla to let Charlotte speak, quickly became a global phenomenon. Hashtags like hashtag Let Charlotte Speak, hash George the Brave, and hash Queen. Catherine began to appear, spreading at lightning speed. On Twitter, a veteran journalist wrote, "That moment might change history. That boy didn't just defend his sister, he reminded us of the true value of a king." The next clip, showing Charlotte stepping onto the stage, hands slightly trembling as she held her speech, then reading out each word clearly, brought millions to tears. The innocent words she uttered, "We are never too small to make something good happen," became a slogan, printed on shirts, mugs, and even displayed on digital billboards in the heart of London. No declaration was needed. The public had chosen a side. Support for Catherine surged. Public opinion polls conducted by YouGov and Ipsos Mori just days later showed the percentage of Britons expressing deep admiration for Catherine, rising from 68% to 91%, an unprecedented figure for any royal family member other than Queen Elizabeth II. In sharp contrast, Camilla's image plummeted. The old hollow praises about stability or soft diplomacy skills seemed to lose all meaning. Online, people began sharing old interviews, cold glances from Camilla at events attended by Catherine, and especially her calculated expressions during the backstage drama of the recent ceremony. An analysis in The Guardian wrote, "What made Camilla fail was not that Catherine said too much, but that Catherine said nothing at all. Her silence, coupled with her love for her children, created a ripple effect far beyond any media strategy." And social commentator Mary Fletcherson of The Times boldly declared Catherine won not through argument, but through love, courage, and perfect timing. She doesn't need a throne to be the people's queen. Hundreds of letters, emails, and handwritten notes were sent to Kensington Palace. Children drew pictures of Charlotte standing on the stage. Adults wrote in to praise George's bravery. A primary school teacher in Glasgow even held an entire class themed "Standing Up for What's Right," based on the actions of the royal siblings. Amid the storm, Catherine remained composed. She made no public statement, appeared on no television programs, did nothing to stir the situation further. But it was this very silence that made her image shine even brighter. Because the public knew this woman didn't need to say a single word, her actions and her heart had spoken in her place. In fact, there was a deeper, quieter wave, stronger than any media coverage, an awakening among those who once stayed silent, thinking palace matters have nothing to do with me. This time was different. The people felt insulted watching a child being treated unfairly. They were outraged that a girl like Charlotte, innocent and full of promise, became a victim of a cold-blooded power game. Above all, they felt inspired to see a mother not through power or title, but through love and inner strength rise up to defend her child with pride. Camilla, who once believed she had control over the game, now became quieter than ever. She avoided public appearances for several days. Events bearing her name were suddenly canceled or had their durations cut short. Some analysts suggested that the Buckingham Palace was reassessing the Queen's media strategy. Meanwhile, Catherine was invited to speak at several important conferences on education and children's mental health fields she had dedicated years to building but were previously overlooked by the media. Now, people were not just listening to her as a princess, but as a mother, a real woman, and above all, an emotional leader of a new generation. As time went on, the public came to realize that Catherine was not alone. She had a family united in solidarity, a steadfast husband, brave children, and most importantly, she had the trust of the people, something no throne could bestow and no power could take away. The silent war within the palace was not over. But clearly, Catherine had won the first battle, of victory that required no declaration. No rebuttal, just a gentle gaze toward her children and a heart that never wavered amid the fiercest political storms. And as one commentator wrote, if Camilla is queen by title, then Catherine is queen in the hearts of the people. And that, no one can replace. From that moment on, people no longer looked at the palace with caution, but began watching it with hope. Because Catherine, in a quiet yet determined way, had started to reshape the future of the British monarchy, not through power, but through love. No longer merely a symbol of rigid ceremony, the monarchy under Catherine's quiet leadership began to take on a new image. She didn't need to change the institutional structure, didn't need to rewrite the royal constitution. What she changed was the heart of the publican, and the most remarkable part was that she did it not through politics, but through seemingly simple actions, allowing Charlotte to speak, letting George defend his sister, and allowing William to step back not because he was pushed aside, but to lift his wife to her rightful place. People used to say William was born to be king. But no one expected that the woman who entered his life, once dismissed as a commoner, as plain Kate, would be the very one to lay the foundation for a monarchy so beloved by the people. William did not fight for the spotlight. He quietly stood behind Catherine, quietly walked a step slower during public events, so the light would shine on his wife. A deliberate decision, full of subtlety, and above all, deep respect. It is this unity that has created a new model of monarchy, modern, approachable, and centered on family. No longer cold handshakes at formal receptions, but everyday moments, Catherine holding Charlotte's hand in a crowd, William bending down to fix George's collar, or the whole family chatting with school children without a single bodyguard stepping in. All of it was recorded, shared, and became emotional material the public could believe in. Thanks to that, Charlotte and George were no longer just royal children bound by protocol. They became symbols of a new generation, intelligent, brave, and emotionally rich. People wrote that Charlotte had Diana's fierce spirit, George carried Queen Elizabeth's dignity, and both were raised in a home where love was not overshadowed by ceremony. And at the center of it all, Catherine rose as an irreplaceable symbol. She didn't give many speeches. She didn't grant loud interviews. But every time she appeared, she sent a message. Family is the foundation of a nation, and kindness is the light that guides power. Royal scholars began to redefine the role of the Princess of Wales. Royal historian Edward Kingsley wrote in an essay published in the Royal Review Journal, "In more than 200 years, there has never been a woman who did not hold the crown, yet had such profound influence in shaping royal culture like Catherine. She halted internal fragmentation with the heart of a mother. It was not iron resolve, but her patience and sensitivity that saved the monarchy from the decay of internal power. A new reign, a new trust, and a new symbol, all began with a woman who did not choose power, but chose to protect her child. Catherine did not change the royal rules, but she did something even more important. She reignited a trust that had long grown cold in the hearts of the British people. Since the death of Princess Diana, never had the public felt so close to the royal family as they do now. In fact, several independent organizations have recorded a growing wave of calls to grant Catherine more public representation. Some members of Parliament have quietly supported proposals that the future Queen should not merely play a ceremonial role, but should hold genuine influence over the direction of soft policy, something once unthinkable in the history of constitutional monarchy. Camilla may still hold the current title, but her image is fading, like the final chapter of a book no one wishes to continue reading. Meanwhile, Catherine, the woman without a crown, is writing the radiant first chapter of a reign that has yet to officially begin, but is already deeply engraved in the hearts of the people. Because if royalty is built on ceremony and power, Catherine has proven this, it can only endure through love and unity. The future of the monarchy, from this moment on, is no longer defined by grand balcony appearances at Buckingham Palace, but by the moment Charlotte bravely stood up, George defended his sister, William handed the spotlight to his wife, And Catherine, quietly, steadfastly took small but decisive steps on the path that brings the royal family closer to the people's hearts than ever before. And when the old, the young, and people from all walks of life can look at that image and smile, that is the moment the monarchy ceases to be a distant symbol and becomes part of life, of emotion, and of hope. The future of the British monarchy has been redefined, not by the throne, but by a woman named Catherine. Thank you for taking the time to follow this emotional and turbulent story with us. Your support and attention are the greatest motivation for us to continue uncovering, analyzing, and revealing the untold corners of the British royal family. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. See you again in upcoming videos, where the truth is always brought to light.